Well, I don't know if anybody else is going to come. First Kings. We'll get started on that. I found a verse from Proverbs that I used for this book. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. So that was the kind of the verse for First Kings, Proverbs 21, verse 1. But we'll see to what extent he does that, because as we begin a study of the kings after David, we'll begin to see that they're not always men after God's own heart, to say the least. And, oh, James, how are you? You got a coat this week.
Yay.
I'm glad you got one. We're just talking about the kings of Israel as we will see them begin to be reflected here. God is in control, and there are kings who are described as good and kings who are described as bad. But even so, God is still in control, and he can oust a king. He can take the life of a king. He can do a lot of things. So we'll see that as we go along. But as we begin the book of First Kings, or sometimes the book of Third Kings, because First and Second Samuel are really about kings also. We begin a transition from what? From King David to King Solomon, his son. And so that's what we find.
Kings 1 and 2 is considered one book. Not, I know
Yes.
Septuagint has 1, 2, Kings 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, but Kings is 1 and 2.
In the Septuagint,
separate book from Samuel.
Yeah.
You got Samuel, you have Kings, those are two separate books.
And there's no first and second in the old version. So anyway, but this is for our convenience as we look at things. What's the status of the kingdom as the transition from David to Solomon occurs? That's our first question. Was the kingdom of Israel spiritually stronger as a result of David's reign? David had his problems. One of his sons rebelled against him. There was, in a sense, civil war. But what's the spiritual state of the kingdom?
Solomon says something later that there was rest. That God, that David finally brought rest to Israel. That's probably
Okay.
the best. Could say something like that.
In David's, well, I guess we might say we get to the next part, David's testament. And we find what's described in this edition as the last words of David in 2 Samuel 23. The oracle of David, son of Jesse, the oracle of the man exalted by the Most High, the man anointed by the God of Jacob, Israel's singer of songs. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over men in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God, he is like the light of morning at sunrise, on a cloudless morning, like the brightness after rain that brings the grass from the earth. And the verse I wanted to kind of target is not my house right with God? Has he not made with me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part? Will he not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire? So I like that phrase, is not my house right with God? And so, in spite of his troubles, he's able to say that. And when he thinks of his house, I'm sure he has in mind the succession. Come in, including his son Solomon. So, what has David done to make the kingdom stronger spiritually? The answer may not be really in First or Second Kings, actually. But is there anything we know of David? We might have to turn to another book that we'll get to, and that's First Chronicles, because First Chronicles and Second Chronicles have a point of view a little bit different than a pure historian. Those books, and we'll talk about it when we get there, are kind of from the point of view of a religious leader. Often they're described as having a priestly point of view. But for instance, in First Chronicles chapter 15, chapter 22, 23, David has organized the religion and has singers and musicians. He has 4,000 singers, 288 skilled musicians, whatever that means for that times. He has organized the Levites into the courses of the priesthood. He has prepared for the temple. He didn't build the temple, but he did a lot of work in preparation for it. So he's really a kind of organized religion. And his organization lasts really until the time of Christ, because we find Zechariah's father of John the Baptist, of the course of Abijah. He's one of the courses of the priesthood, or how would we best say that? The priests served in Jerusalem for a period of time, but then they went back to their home. And so that they took turns coming through. And then when they were in Jerusalem, they ate of the sacrifices. They went back home and ate of their farm produce. But David is the one who organized that. And the 24 courses of the priesthood are set forth. And Zechariah was a part of that, as we read later. So
it was interrupted when they went on Exodus, or captivity.
Well, yes, but it's interesting that it was resumed. So anyway, so I would say the kingdom was spiritually stronger as a result of David's emphasis on worship and preparation for worship.
Do you think God inspired him to do that?
I would think that as he considered his responsibility as king, and that God certainly inspired him to do that. So we find that the kingdom is stronger spiritually. just when the leader is spiritual, then more of the people are. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that in. We were talking about David's sons. If we want to read a lot about David's sons, there's a lot of them mentioned in Chronicles also. First Chronicles chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. He had a lot of sons. And then in First Chronicles 14. But anyway, we don't need to read all of those names, but they're mentioned. What was David's testament? I don't know that he wrote a will and fired it and filed it at Somerset House.
Well, his last decree, his last charge to Solomon was to deal with his enemies and reward those who were faithful.
Okay, yeah, first of all, he wanted Solomon to be king. He had all those sons named in Chronicles, and we read about some of them from 2 Samuel last time. But he had told Bathsheba, your son Solomon will be king. And that was David's intent. And we find that upon his death, one of his other sons, Adonijah, decided to set himself up as king. And so there was a controversy there. But David made Solomon king by causing him to ride through, not on his horse, but on his donkey, because that was the royal mode of transportation, his donkey. So that's in chapter 1 of First Kings. But then, I guess we might say the real, let's see if they can. The real testament, if there is one, is chapter 2 of First Kings, which is David's charge to Solomon. And a wonderful way for a father to talk to his son. I'm about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, show yourself a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in his ways and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and requirements, as written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. So that's really sums up David's desire for his son and for the kingdom. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. And regardless of the ups and downs, that prophecy is fulfilled, because on the throne of the kingdom is a descendant of Solomon, Jesus Christ. But as you say, he has some extra parts to his. Now you yourself know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He murdered them. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime, as if in battle, and stained the belt. Do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. So he hasn't gotten Joab, but he says to Solomon, get him. And then he has some other comments about some people who showed him kindness during the rebellion of Absalom, and another fellow who was not kind. You have with you Shimei, who ridiculed him and so on. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. And so that's essentially what David's charge was. He reigned 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 years in Jerusalem. Sometimes we overlook that he didn't really take over the whole kingdom until Ishbosheth, son of Saul, had been deposed, and he was then moved the capital from Judah up to Jerusalem, a little more centrally located, but still south. So anyway, then the focus upon, after David's death, the focus upon Solomon. And we begin to see what we know of him. So how did Solomon, he's known as a wise king, how did Solomon acquire wisdom and wealth?
Gift.
What's that?
It was a gift. It was blessed.
Yeah, chapter 3 of First Kings. He asked for it. He asked for it. And that's one of the more famous aspects of Solomon's rule. His throne was established, and but before that, we read in chapter 3, verse 1, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because a temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. And that's going to be a little phrase that we'll find throughout First and Second Kings. King will be described. This is a good king. He served the Lord, but the people continued to worship at the high places. A kind of a tradition based upon what they found in Canaan. But it wasn't the Lord's will. And some of the kings will even say, and he suppressed the worship at the high places. But the construction of the temple was supposed to create such a focus on the temple that other worship on the hills and so on would cease, and people would come to Jerusalem to worship. Not the easiest thing. I guess they probably didn't have to travel in a couple of feet of snow and in 0-degree temperatures as we do from time to time. But it was expected that people come to Jerusalem to worship God several times a year. And it's interesting that when we get to the New Testament, that's exactly what we find Joseph and Mary doing. I wonder how many of the people traveled that distance. Imagine some said, I'm staying at home rather than walking, 70 miles or whatever, riding a horse or donkey. But anyway, that's what we find here. The temple was, and the population of Jerusalem during those feasts burgeoned. And, where were people going to stay? Joseph and Mary couldn't find a place to stay. Anyway, king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. And what would you say if the Lord said that to you? Ask for whatever you want. It's like the genie, Here, I guess he only got one wish. rather than 3. But it's interesting what he did say. You've shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you've made your servant king, but I'm only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number, although David tried. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? I don't know. Is that what we would ask for? If you had anything in the world, what would you ask for? He asked for a discerning heart, for wisdom. And then they'll give examples of it, or at least one example later. The Lord was pleased that Solomon asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in my ways and obey my statutes and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon awoke and he realized it had been a dream. So anyway, that's Solomon's wish, a request of God. Do we ever request that of God? Maybe he doesn't come to us and say, I'm going to give you everything, anything that you ask for. But when we talk to God, what do we ask for? Oh, probably strength and health if we're not feeling good. Sometimes we may not ask for riches, but we ask for enough to get by, or enough to get by a little bit more than we're doing. We'd like a little bit more in the material realm. But how often do we ask for wisdom and discernment? Certainly, if we're leaders in the church, that should be on our hearts and minds. But really, for everyone, we should pray for wisdom, discernment, how to discern between what's really right and wrong. So, anyway, what do you ask God for among all the asking? I'll never forget there was a business publication that I think is still going, but it's not owned by the same man. It's called Forbes. And when the original founder of the magazine began publishing, he always had in the front, with all thy getting, get understanding, in every issue of that magazine. With all thy getting. And it was a materialistic magazine about how to make money in the stock market and so on. But with all thy getting, get understanding is what he wrote there. Kind of quoting, I don't know if that's a direct quote from one of the Proverbs, but that always stuck with me. Anyway, get understanding. Any other
It says it's
comment?
a principle from Proverbs 4:7,
Okay. What is it?
so I don't have 4:7 pulled up.
Okay. Nobody remembers four.
Hmm.
Wisdom is supreme, therefore get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding.
Hmm.
That's the words of the proverb. So Solomon was of that type. And he was blessed with these other things. Although you wonder if he'd have lived longer, if he'd have done better. He reigned for 40 years. It's interesting that all three of the first kings reigned for 40 years. David and Solomon were told in the Old Testament. Where do we find the reign of Saul? It's not in the Old Testament. It's in those New Testament passages where Stephen goes through the history of Israel. And then later, Paul has some comments about the history of Israel in Acts chapter 13. And that's where we learn that Saul reigned 40 years as well as David and Solomon. Anyway, how did Solomon build the temple? He didn't do the work, by the way. Right? He's chapter 5. Hey, supervised. But preparation for building the temple, and he got a lot of cedar from Hiram, from Lebanon, and Hiram sent word for chapter 5. Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and pine logs he wanted. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed oil, olive oil. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom just as he had promised him. And verse 13, this is chapter 5, verse 13. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. So what do you think of that? Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workmen. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of quality stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and the men of Gebo cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. And a massive structure, maybe not as massive as the pyramids, but they had to get those gigantic stones and put them in place. And it took a lot of work. How long did it take? 7 years, verse 38. Chapter. The foundation was laid in the 4th year. In the 11th year, the 8th month, the temple was finished. 11 years, I'm saying. He had, according to its specification, he had spent 7 years building it. So I guess 4 years to lay the foundation, 7 years to build the temple itself. a total of 11 years. So it was a massive thing. Hard to underestimate the amount of labor that went into it. So it took a lot of planning, and it was a massive and a wonderful structure for many years. So that's one of the things that Solomon is remembered for.
Is it different to conscript your own people than bring slaves from somewhere else? Is it,
Well-
you know, just, I mean, for some people, like even when you're drafted to the military, it can be bad, but it's a job too.
That was the common thing in a military campaign. You get some slaves, but it appears these were Israelite workmen, and maybe that's what he intended for work on the Lord's house, if you will. Conscripted labor, good or bad, I don't know. Was the Lord pleased with all this?
Seems to be.
Yeah, it
He
seems.
didn't want David to build a house. He
Yeah,
said, your son will build a house. So
yeah.
part of his plan, I guess, he wanted his will that he do it. So
Chapter 8. Okay. We have a detailed description of the furnishings, the Ark of the Covenant, the altar of incense, the table for the bread, the lampstand, in chapter 7. The Ark of the Covenant is brought to the temple, chapter 8, and from the Zion, the city of David. Chapter 8 goes into it a little bit more.
Did they lose some of the contents when it went back and forth to Philistines? No, I thought there was something else in there besides the stones early.
What's that?
Yeah, the jar of manna.
I thought that I read around with it. They lost some of the contents
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah, whether the Philistines
Mhm.
dumped them out or whatever. Yeah, what was in it here? Did you find it?
Back in the days.
Anyway, oh, here. The scene, a huge, it held 2,000 baths. That was for washing. 10 bronze basins and so on. One of the ways we're assured that the Lord was pleased with this is in verse 10 of chapter 8. When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple. Where else do we find the glory of the Lord? It has another name. It's sometimes called the Shekinah, or it's different pronunciations of the term. Anywhere else, where else do we see it? Well, we see it in Exodus. It fills the original tabernacle to show God is pleased with that. But more ominously, where do we see the Shekinah of the glory of the Lord.
Ezekiel?
Ezekiel sees it rising from Jerusalem and leaving Jerusalem and going east. But then he sees it coming back after captivity. It's the presence of the Lord, a cloud, a bright cloud. The essence of the Lord is glorious. So
Ancient cultures believe God's hidden the clouds. It's in Greek literature. It's in Greek literature as well that the gods are in the clouds.
yeah, this seems to have been a special cloud.
Right. The Shekinah is different.
But it kind of indicates the Lord was pleased with what Solomon had done. And what else? Oh, in chapter 9, verse 1, when Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time. When's the first time? When he was,
Dream?
yeah, when he was offered a wish. As the Lord said to him, I've heard the prayer and the plea you made and have consecrated the temple, and so on. If you walk before me with integrity and uprightness, and do all I command, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever. But if you or your sons turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees, I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. And although the temple is now imposing, all who pass by will be appalled and will scoff at why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to his temple. So anyway, and then there's an account of the forced labor. So let's see where. Oh, we've got time.
Said I think he forgot those words.
Yeah.
Man, and this is God appearing before Solomon. You think that'd be something he would never forget?
Yeah.
I don't think any of us would forget it. Would God appeared, talked to us in some manifestation? But he kind of, I don't know, got caught up in all this other building and all the wives, and he forgot. He lost his integrity, and then he had a sad ending because of it. Could have had a great ending, right? But he didn't. A great start, but a bad ending.
Seems as a
Should have wrote him down.
cautionary reminder of the Lord to appear before him the second time.
That's two times he's had it up here. That would really sink in, I would think. Second time is always better. But I'm sure he had a good memory. It just he's not caught up.
Let's jump there now. We'll talk about the Queen of Sheba in a minute. How many times did God appear to Solomon? Well, we know of two. Turn to chapter 11, verse 9. Chapter 11 talks about Solomon's wives, 700 wives and 300 concubines. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God. Then in verse 9, the Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods. So I wanted to. The Lord, it says here, because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice.
Yeah, very sad, isn't it?
Yeah, had appeared to him twice. And that, kind of struck me as I read that. The Lord is kind of, I appeared to him twice. Wasn't that enough?
Yeah.
But apparently it wasn't.
Hmm.
I just wondered if God ever looks at our lives and says, not necessarily that I've appeared to him twice, because maybe he hasn't appeared to us in the same way he appeared to Solomon. But he may have this to say, I've given him so much, or I've done this and that for him or for her, and yet his heart is not true to me. Is that possible? That the Lord would ever be frustrated? I've given him the church and a good home, or I've given him good teachers and
God's word right here.
the word.
We got about great blessing.
Solomon didn't have a Bible
We do.
to turn to read. I just wonder, it sounds like a little frustration on the part of God. I appeared to him twice. Shouldn't that be enough?
Yeah.
Now,
Ideally, it should be.
it should have been, even though there were years between those appearances and some of this stuff that happened later in Solomon's life. But the Lord, that should have been enough. I just wonder, as we think of our own lives, can we ever see God saying that I gave him or her so much, and yet he's really not what he should be, or she's not what she could have been if he were.
We have to kind of see him like a parent, I guess, Go through the same thing with their children sometimes.
That's right.
They mess up. I get usually in high school, that's the real trial period. And they do things that they know they shouldn't have, but a good parent will stay with them,
Yeah.
and see them through it, and hopefully they come out good on the other end, They go through that rough period. So I picture God like that.
Yeah.
But there will be a judgment day where lines will be drawn. That's another thing you got to think about. We all stand before Christ someday, and the book is going to be opened, it says, and we're going to be judged by this book. So that's going to play in there too. If we just totally ignored it and threw it away from us, well, that could change our eternal outlook, our eternal destiny.
Yeah.
But so it's a mix, I think, of a lot of things. God's love, plus we got some responsibility here to follow through. Are we doing it, or are we just throwing it away? Taking God's grace is cheap, not cheap.
I wonder what Solomon's eternal destiny is. After all that good stuff he did, then he turns and starts building temples to idols at the end of his life. So,
He didn't got an idol worship.
yeah,
The women, that was his wives, I'm just saying women, but his wives pulled him that direction.
he allowed it.
Yeah, he went along with it. Hook, line, and sinker, we went stay. And if you're a fisherman, you see it that way.
I was the Queen of Sheba is a lady who came and was impressed by Solomon's wealth. He showed her all the stuff that he had, and she praised. It's from that visit that what expression comes that we don't use too much anymore. The half has never yet been told. There's a song to that.
Yeah, we have a song about that.
The half has never yet been told. She was so impressed by Solomon's wealth that she said half was not told to me. She was evidently from Central Africa. The legend, of course, that's come down for the centuries in literature and in the lives of some is that Solomon had intercourse with the Queen of Sheba and had descendants of her. There was a gentleman who was a leader in Africa when I was growing up. His name was Haile Selassie. He was the king of Ethiopia. He described himself as the Lion of Judah because he felt that he was a descendant of the pairing of the Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And that was a tradition among the Ethiopian kings. Don't know if it's true.
That doesn't square with the Bible.
That kind of doubt whether he
There about
knew.
that.
If you're a historian, King Haile Selassie was honored during and after World War II because he resisted the Italian invasion. The Italian East Africa consisted of Somaliland, and the Germans were taking over countries. So the Duce, Benito Mussolini, thought, I'll move from Somaliland and take over Ethiopia. And Haile Selassie was able to resist the Italian invasion for quite some time with just swords and sticks and spears. And so he was honored by the Allies for that resistance. And he finds his name in some songs of the era. Anyway.
I never remembered this. She saw all this stuff in the food and there was no more breath in her. She was,
Yeah, very impressed.
and then said that.
So, anyway, recollections of King Haile Selassie. He was really, in reality, a dictator, like the rest of them. But anyway,
Interesting fella, interesting fella. Would like to meet him.
we'll take it up from there. And
She must have been pretty well off herself, huh?
oh,